All right, everyone. So today we're going to be doing a little how-to on how I implement calling into my hunting regime. This is mostly going to be geared around the lockdown phase. That's when I have the most success using these tactics. But if you look at back here at the habitat that we're in, this is really the habitat that I like to focus on. What'll happen is you'll get bucks pushing does out of the more mature timber into this kind of like savanna timber here, and they'll bed down at a point. I don't know if you can see that point out there, but there's like a finger of trees that comes out, and they'll bed down with does right on that finger. And you get into sections like this where you have like a little bit of a valley or a high point. You can glass these bucks up, see their antlers sticking up out of the grass, and you can make a move on them depending upon your wind, the terrain, so on and so forth. So that's kind of the layout that I really like to use. We're going to take you into it a little bit further as to how to set up on these certain locations, if you have a deer bedded on that point, so on and so forth. So hang with us. All right, so if you look through this little drainage and up the other side, there's a group of dead trees, a little cluster there. That's going to be like your ideal situation where you'll see a buck bedded with a doe on a certain point, or on these points where they're in lockdown phase. So we're going to go through basically the buddy hunt. That's what I really like to do, is use two people. It's kind of like turkey calling. So you're going to have one person, let's say I'm the shooter. You'll probably have one person set up in this location, winds blowing that direction, downwind away from the bedded buck, and then the other person's going to be down this road over by that dead pine tree there. Can you see that pine tree? Okay. That's where you would probably set up as the caller. So we'll move down here, get into the caller position, and then we'll switch back over to the shooter position. We're looking at this caller position here. We're up on a high point. You have a blocker here. So the buck's not going to be able to loop around through this thick stuff and really try to get downwind of you. The only way that he's going to get downwind of you is by going down into that drainage. Wind is still pushing this direction. He'd have to loop all the way around you. I would honestly say 9 times out of 10, they don't do that. When you get up, right up in their grill, and they got a girl on their side, they're gonna beeline basically almost right at that sound. So I would either, as the caller, and this is with the weapon, with the bow, in archery season, I would either set up right here, or I'd set up right here. Now I'm blind for that where the buck was, so you want to start out nice and easy. I typically just start out with a grunt tube, making a couple grunts, especially in this situation where we have blockers. But you're going to do more of the aggressive tending grunts that a younger buck is interested in hanging around the area, so that that guy gets fired up and wants to come over and push that other buck out. But what you don't want to do is, you don't want to be like, you don't want to be too loud where it's like your grandma's sleeping and you want to ask her to make you a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Hey grandma! Go in nice and slow, and then you can always, nice and quiet, and you can always up the volume, reading the deer language. Now we're going to switch over to the shooter position. This setup here is a little tricky. I like to be in a situation where the shooter can make hand movements to me, as far as bucks coming in, tone it down, be more aggressive, whatever. We work that out before we do the setup. But this is going to be your shooter location here. If I'm the shooter, I'm going to get up on this high point. Good binos is a must. Rangefinder, somewhere where that I can get a little bit hidden, see that point, and make a read on what that buck's doing. If he makes a straight line up this and then wants to come down this road, I mean, you're looking at a 15-yard shot. If that buck ends up just going straight down that drainage and then basically J-hooking up to the caller's location, I can make a move down this way. I have a blocker. Like I said, that's one of the important things. You want to read your features, try to get blockers that you can keep between you and the deer so that you can make movements. I can make a movement here, get down, the deer comes around this edge of goldenrod, I'm in full draw, ready to make my shot. And then also you have your partner there if he ends up needing to make the shot. So that's kind of set up for grunting. Now we're going to go into a little bit of a decoy move if you're solo. So this is our location if you're in a solo position. Again, we have the buck over at the dead trees, the point, that finger over there. We spotted him up through glass. We have a blocker here, wind's going that direction. All right, so basically, this especially works really well if you have a decoy, but if you don't, there's enough cover here that he's not gonna get too leery of potentially not seeing the buck. But again, I try to read the deer's language. I'll start out tickling the antlers. That deer gets up. If he gets up and stands up out of his bed, I'm gonna let him relax, and then I'm gonna throw some grunts. These grunts are gonna be a little bit more aggressive. So, after that sequence, I'll shut it down, read the deer's body language. Sometimes you gotta give them 10 minutes, because what they're doing is they're processing where the sound came from, and then locating your position. They'll usually make a move after that. If you don't get a reaction in that 10, 15, 20 minute window, that's when you want to go through, get on it again. Start really getting on the antlers. If you got some brush here, hitting brush, trying to stay low, make sure that you're covered. If they see this stuff going, that's all right. You got plenty of cover here that by the time he gets in the window to see what's really going here, he's in your shooting lane. There, tries to come up the hill, you pop up over, you got him. Let's swing around and we'll give you the perspective from the deer's point of view. All right, so if you can sneak into these spots like this, you have all this goldenrod, this high ground cover. You get on the ground, you sneak into here. Or let's say you're a couple 100 yards back and you glass a buck on that point, or how it kind of makes a bowl back in there on one of those dead trees. This is almost a money kill spot. You can get into these locations, go through that grunt sequence, and you can call them down almost on a string right to you. I just want to reiterate, like I said before, these tactics that we're going through are really only for the lockdown stage of the rut. They don't work in preseason or pre-rut, and they don't work post-rut unless you can find a buck that's locked down with a doe. And even still, especially pre-rut, they're not really that great. That's all I have to say. All right, so we came over to that other spot that we talked about earlier. We just want to give you kind of the layout. This being so open, like I said, with the ground cover, is the main reason that you kind of want to stay away from these spots. Yeah, you'll have ground cover pushed back a little bit farther, but how are you going to get in here and set up? What that deer is going to do is, or what that buck's going to do is just walk out to this flat, scan this whole hillside, and more than likely is going to look for that buck. Doesn't see that buck, get out of dodge, head back, push his doe out of the location. You're not going to get that that encounter that you need. So you got to be careful on setups where there's potential, I call them lookout spots, like this, where if a buck's bedded with a doe down there, you call him in, but he only half commits, just like a turkey. They're going to walk out to this spot, observe the area. They don't see what the sound's coming from. There's no decoy. They're gonna know right away, especially on public land, that something's up and get out of dodge. This is a really good setup for cold calling. If you don't have that buck located, but the habitat back there looks like prime lockdown habitat, where a buck can push a doe in there, have that thick stuff all secluded to himself, especially if you can see where those aspens are and those red oaks back there. They'll bed down right at the bottom of those trees and basically be able to look out into this little drainage here and have the back cover. What you'll do is you can get your partner to sneak down into that little rise there. As the caller, I'm going to go back here. Set up somewhere like right here. And this is a really good one where you can really crash the antlers. You're looking to basically get that deer to come out to that rise for your partner to get a shot. So this is how I'm gonna set up on it. Try to be able to see my partner, wait for that buck to, or try to watch for that buck to come out. Then I'm going to give my 10-15 minute wait, let that buck make a decision. Nothing happens in that 10 to 15 minutes. I'm going to do another sequence. Try to go a little bit heavier. The buck might not have heard you, or he just didn't make up his mind. Hearing it that second time might have got him a little pissed off that he wants to come check out and see what bucks are doing around his lady. Last year, I called a buck using this exact same tactic into my stepdad from that tree to me away. It was probably like 115-inch 8-point, but you can get some really awesome encounters. Now we're gonna go check out what a potential bedding area for lockdown looks like. So we want to give you what kind of the deer's point of view is. What they're doing here is the buck's basically being on watch out, and then the doe will stand up when she's ready. He'll breed her. She'll lay back down, and then they'll go basically through their breeding process multiple times for that 72 hours. If you look around, this is basically the perfect place for a buck to, like, think of it as like a washout on a castle or a tower. It kind of puts it in a little bit of perspective for you. But your watchout's going to be on this point, and he can see anything that's potentially going to be wandering into his area. So in relation to lockdown bedding compared to your normal preseason, pre-rut, rut bedding, it's totally different. It's more based on survival, whereas this is based on protecting his territory. So let's take a walk up here and I'll basically show you almost exactly. There is a deer bed in here, but where it's going to look like. So right here is a deer bed. I don't know how well it shows up on the camera, but you can see there's an exit trail there and there's an exit trail there where they're able to bed on this point, have this whole drainage in view, and pretty much be very, very safe. You have the cover back there, a couple bounds, and they're in security cover. But the main thing when you're out looking for these locations is concentrate on the lookout points or any place that might be a lookout, and then you're just looking for tips of time sticking up like that. This is where good glass really comes in handy. The doe's going to be bedded somewhere around out in front of the buck, typically, and then you have to make your setup based on the wind and potentially even the way that the buck's facing. So let's say that, and this normally isn't the case, but let's say that the buck just happens to be facing into the wind and the wind's coming this direction. Well, now you're going to try to want to set up somewhere on his 90, either that direction or even at his like 5 o'clock or 7 o'clock, so that he basically has to make a move like this. Wind's in his face, he can't smell you. All that stuff is pretty much a no-go. You can't do it. However, like we said before, that wide open, and especially you can see it from here, that buck just looks this way, stands up, he can see that there's nothing down there worth even going to. It's danger zone all the way. So I hope that makes sense. If you guys have any questions, reach out to me. It's kind of just a general outline. I could definitely get into it more in depth if you want to talk about how I go about my calling sequences, that kind of stuff. There's no written recipe for calling sequences. It's more so reading the deer's body language. So if you go in soft, I think that's the best way to start out. Start out soft, nice. You can always get more aggressive, but you can't start out super aggressive and then back down. Think about it like this. If you're walking into a bar, you don't say, "Hey, girl, you want to go out with me?" No, you strike up a conversation. You talk politely, that kind of stuff. So I think a lot of people, when they first start calling, they really overdo it. And especially if you're blind calling, you don't potentially know where that deer is at. They might only be 20 yards away from you. So throw in potentially multiple calling sequences, 4, 5, 6, and go from there. All right, everyone, so we're wrapping up here now. I'm Toren Shirk. If you guys have any questions for me, you can get a hold of me on the Cervicide website. My email is toren@cervicide.com. The Cervicide Nation page, or if you're interested in joining the Cervicide Hunt Club, give me a shout on my email. Or if you just want to talk tactics, you can get a hold of me through Instagram, The Wild Rambler, low bars between each word. We can talk through Instagram or just shoot me an email. Thanks, everyone.